Good morning, Craig. How are you today?
Hey, Bertha, I'm happy, healthy, glad it stopped raining out here, but I'm super excited to be talking with you today on your platform. Thanks for having me.
Likewise, I'm very excited to have you today. I have seen a little bit of your background, and you really are touching a space that I feel very passionate about, entrepreneurship. So today I want to talk about a little bit about your journey. I'm very interested in having you share how you got to where you are today and some of the experiences that you've had. And also, let our viewers know about you, what you do, and how they can reach you should they get on this journey, this fascinating journey that you and I have embarked on. And so, Craig, you're the founder and owner of Cre8tive Craig, which is your brand, and so it's CRE with the number 8 TIVE. And you're also the author of a book called Burdens of Dream. So I'm hoping that you'll share a little bit of that today with us too. So welcome and thank you for being here today.
Well, thanks again for having me on. And so to begin, I always lead with like my personal story because like my story is the perfect amalgamation for how I became who I am today. And so my name's Craig. I'm originally from Cincinnati, Ohio, but I'm moving, but growing up, I moved around a lot because of my father's job. I went to three different high schools just to explain like how tumultuous my upbringing was. And one of the things that kept me grounded was business. I launched my first company at the age of 15 in Columbus, Ohio, where I was a teen DJ. And don't laugh at me, but my name was DJ Absolute Craig. And
Ah,
so it was a super fun adventure. I was booked, all across the city, mainly worked at some of the teen clubs. But that's kind of what really taught me like the benefit of creating your own source of money because my parents didn't have a lot of income. And if I wanted to get my own car, my own speakers, I had to fund it myself.
right.
But at the same time of being involved with business, another thing that kept me grounded was athletics. I was a really good football player, and I got the opportunity to play Division I football at Sanford University in Birmingham, Alabama. And
Oh,
so my whole dream, in college was to be a professional athlete, and I had the skills and the aptitude to get there. But my sophomore year, I suffered a career-ending injury, and I almost thought about dropping out of school. But my best class was Spanish, and my professor locked me in her room, and she's like, "Craig, don't drop out. This is the worst decision you could make. But what you should do is maybe take a break and go study abroad somewhere and get outside of your head and come back and make a new decision." And so I reluctantly filled out that paperwork, but went to Costa Rica for 3 months and completely had my mind blown. A lot of the Costa Ricans go by this statement, La Pura Vida, and like the pure life. And it's just like a way of being and just getting out of my own head and getting to see a different perspective, a different culture opened me up to this idea of not only living abroad, but working abroad as well. So I got back to school and I started DJing to make ends meet because I didn't have a full athletic scholarship. And I switched my major to entrepreneurship, double minored in Spanish and international business. And I got my degree in 4 years. And my parents are like, "Hey, if you go into the workforce, you'll never go back to school." So I found myself moving down to Tampa where I knocked out my MBA in less than a year, which is really crazy because it's typically a 2-year program. And so because I went through the program so quickly, I didn't have any job offers before I graduated. And so I didn't know what to do next. But what happened is that I ran into a Peace Corps recruiter at a Chipotle, and she's like, "You're fluent in Spanish, you're entrepreneurial, you're creative, you love to travel. Maybe you should apply for the Peace Corps." And so that's what I did. And I wound up getting the opportunity to do business development and business coaching in Peru for 2 years.
wow.
And when I got down there, I'm like, I'm going to start a business in this country. I just don't know who, what, when, where, how, or why this is going to happen. And so one day I was teaching entrepreneurship at a college, and I ran into a professor who was a distiller. And after classes, he taught me how to distill Pisco, which is the national spirit of Peru. And so by day, I was a business coach and consultant, but by night, I was a distiller and bootlegger. And so I was selling a lot of the pisco that I was making to the farmers and business owners that I was coaching. And I built up a really massive following, so much so that I got inspired to move back to Peru as an immigrant hired myself with my distillery and opened up the country's first foreign-owned distillery.
Wow.
And it was a really crazy process, super successful. Got 4 different products to market in less than 9 months,
Wow.
exported across the world. But as I was expanding my footprint, I wanted to extend my lease. And my landlord confessed that she didn't own the property. And so, unfortunately, I was illegally occupying a building, even though I was defrauded with the contract. And so they let me know another family member owned the property, and I got a new contract that was unaffordable. And I had to close my business.
Oh.
And I thought I was a big failure. But I realized that to fail is just to experience a first attempt and learning. And so to kind of wrap up this introduction, since that experience in 2018, I moved back to Costa Rica where I managed and operated a travel startup outside of San Jose. Then I moved to DC where I got into blockchain and I sold my startup Visa Jump, which was the world's first travel visa processing platform leveraged by blockchain. But then in 2019, there was a transition within my family and I decided to move back home and kind of get regrounded in Ohio. And I was lost and didn't know where to start. But I ran into a publisher and he's like, Craig, you have a book in you. And I'm like, really? And that's when I sat down and I started writing my book, Burdens of a Dream. And the first words I wrote were, this book is dedicated to all those that'll dare to abandon the status quo, follow the road not taken, and discover the person they're truly meant to become. And so as much as I was writing those words to my readers, I wrote those words myself because I had to level up and become the next best version of myself, which was an author and a full-time business coach and consultant. And so the journey's been crazy. I never would have imagined all those things would have happened in my life, but I'm so grateful to be here. And yeah, I just wanted to lead with that story, so your audience get to know like how the journey of entrepreneurship is like.
It's an amazing story. And I mean, what do you think, or what could you share? What do you think was that catalyst that kept you moving forward? Because as you had mentioned, some people look at failure differently. Some people fail and then that's it. They stop. And that's a turning point for them where they take another direction and they don't jump into the world of entrepreneurship. So was there something or some things that kept you going and to bring you to where you are today?
Well, me being an author and storyteller, I like allegories. I like, analogies. And one of my favorite movies of all time is The Matrix. And there was a really pivotal scene when the main character is presented with this opportunity to take his next best step and meet this teacher who's going to change his life. And this main character, Neo, he's just super, super scared. And so they're in a car going to this building to meet his new teacher. And he panics and he's like, stop the car. And they open up the car door and he walks out and he looks back down this road and it's raining and it leads to absolutely nowhere. And so what I realized like in life is that like your decisions affect your future. And like what I realized is that if I didn't move forward in life, I would be looking back to nowhere, to nothing, to the familiar. And so for me, life is not about staying the same and being the same. And if I have to grow, I have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. So the catalyst for me for pushing forward was realizing that if I didn't take my next best step, I would remain the same and I wouldn't change and I wouldn't grow.
Wow. Being comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's pretty powerful because that's not easy to do. It's easy to say, right? But jumping into the discomfort. But as you said, that's what takes you to the next level. That's where the growth is, really stepping outside of that bubble of comfort and into the unknown, as to what comes next. And so I'd like to pivot just a little bit. I noticed that you give a lot of good content in your videos. And one of the ones that stood out for me the most was the one where you talked about building a business. And how you have to do it essentially stone by stone. And I really enjoyed the analogy that you made in that video with when you were in Peru and how the building, I'm not going to call them buildings, the architecture there from some of the things that were built thousands of years ago is still standing. How is that possible? So I would love if you could just, touch on that a little bit, because I think it's really important for people who are in the startup world to understand the importance of that message.
Mhm.
And I'd like to share, if you don't mind, once you talk about that message, it's a segue into what we do and how it all ties in together, and how important it is to build a foundation that's solid.
Well, you talk about this concept of building a solid foundation, and I just want to go along this train of building things. We live in a very, very microwave society where people think that they can just get to the penthouse level of business immediately without putting in any hard work. And like, if you study architecture, you realize that the most important part of a building is the foundation. Like,
Right.
the World Trade Center or the tallest skyscrapers in the world may be, thousands of feet high, but they can't survive if they don't have a strong foundation. And
Right.
when you build a foundation, you have to dig a deep hole, and it's dark, it's wet, it's uncomfortable. But then you have to be very, very strategic and lay things out in a certain way that's going to support you when you level up time after time after time.
Mhm.
But what was so fascinating about Peru is that a lot of these ancient structures were built so simply with nothing but stones. But these stones are built so precisely that you can't even stick a piece of paper in between these two stones. But what's
Wow.
ironic is that Peru is prone to a lot of earthquakes. And so modern skyscrapers, modern structures built rapidly with the newest technology, they collapse. But these old Incan structures, they never collapse. And that's because they've built everything brick by brick with precision. They took their time to make sure that everything fits perfectly so that when you layer on top, everything's cohesive, but yet flexible enough to deal with the tremors that happen in life. And so business is the same thing. You have these little pieces of your business, these different processes. You have to make sure that they're built so that they work together, so that when you go through the tremors of business, when things inevitably go wrong, it doesn't unshake and destroy the foundation and the thing that you've built.
Got it. Right. And I see that a lot in what we do. And so as we were talking a little bit before we hit record, and one of the things that I shared with you was that what I saw in my practice was that foundation was missing.
Mm.
There are a lot of companies who have great ideas and rush to market, or rush to get their ideas, out there and exposed to people. But unfortunately, what was missing in the people part was the foundation. It's how are you building your culture? How is the leader building a foundation for their people, their staff, or even for themselves, even if it's a solo entrepreneurship? What is the foundation that you're building so that when you're starting to scale, it's a little bit easier because you have already put in, policies and protocols and all the things that you need, but as well, you have fostered a culture that will survive
Right.
the tremors, will survive the earthquakes, because in the startup world, there is one, it seems like every day, every day there is a tremor.
Yeah.
So I preach that a lot also, is that, being proactive and preventative on the front end of, in particular with people. But, I think it ties in nicely to what you're saying, in addition to just your business in general and overall, making sure you have that solid foundation. And so that particular video really touched me, because it encapsulates what I've been trying to say, or what I'm trying to, to impart to our people. So I thank you for sharing that, and, kind of illuminating, that analogy. I think it's a great analogy, and sticks in my.
Yeah, and I really love that word you mentioned, proactive. Like, when it comes to a business or a business model, there's three words that come to mind: proactive, profitable, and proven. And
Mm.
proactive is important because, like, to me, proactiveness is like a state of awareness. And so in business, particularly in startups, you can never be stagnant. Stuff is changing so quickly. We're talking about earthquakes. Well, there's these things called life quakes. COVID was a big one. There's all these black swans and gray rhinos, tongue twister, that are going to come in and just shake everything up. And so you need to be proactive so that you have, action to, kind of mitigate whatever circumstances you're in. The second P, profitable. Well, this is self-explanatory. Like if you're not making money consistently and predictably, you don't really have a business. You're just hustling. And so you need to make sure that like what you're doing is not just generating revenue, is that you're actually, making profits. And then the last P is like proven. And that's really about standing the test of time. And so like a lot of entrepreneurs, they have all these theories in their mind. And I tell people that like everything you learn is a theory until proven otherwise. And the only way to prove the viability of your business is to go out and test it on real life people. And so when you find a business model that's proactive, profitable, and proven, that's going to lay the foundation for what you can continue to build upon in the future.
Wow. Yep. So true. If someone wanted to reach out to you and to kind of, piggyback on what you just said and to make sure that they're building, how does that look? How can entrepreneurs who are ready to level up and to go to the next level, how does it look if they were to work with you?
Well, it's pretty simple. Like I send people a basic application form that gives me a little bit of context into who they are, where they're at in their business, where they'd like to go, and what are some of their financial goals that they'd like to achieve. And then after that process, make sure that people are a good fit on paper. Then we just schedule a simple 45-minute strategy call where we really get to know each other, fill out our energies, see if there's an opportunity to work together. And once that green light is established, then we form that relationship and start working together for ever how long we both feel that it's going to add value to each other.
Right. And you're at Cre8tive Craig.
Yes, that is CRE, the number 8, IVE, CRAIG.com. And I'll be sure to send over my links and contact information so that you can include that in this posting.
Awesome. Great. And I don't want to leave this chat until you share with us, if you would, one success story that you've had, a client that you have been able to touch and you've seen their journey and, and where they're at today.
Yeah, so I had a client based out of Baltimore. So he considered himself to be an artist and graphic artist, where he ran a print shop where he was doing T-shirts, he was doing clothing, he had a clothing line. He was also teaching, youth within the Baltimore area, like how to start their own clothing line, how to print their own, stuff, digitally. And what was really interesting is that he had so many different channels and so many different verticals within his business model to where that he was so ineffective in generating consistent income. So I took him through my 10-step program, what I call chaos to clarity. And within the first 7 weeks of us talking, he was able to generate $70,000 in revenue from his pop-ups that he was doing all over Baltimore City, and got to figure out, okay, this is my one line of business that I should really be focusing on instead of doing everything for everybody. So I really help my clients to get clarity, because most people, they start off in chaos, then you take them to clarity, then they get confidence. And then after they get confident, they get committed. And then after you get commitment, that's when you see the results you really need. And so most of the transformation, like, it's really mental, but then you go from that mental clarity to physical, results as well.
Awesome. And you have a system. You not only talk the talk, you walk the walk. So your own business, you've got the systems in place, the protocols, which is the foundation, which is
Exactly.
what you're.
Yeah, you gotta practice what you preach, particularly in my world, business coaching and being a business strategist. But that also helps me to know where people are going wrong, because like I've been down that path before. And one of the reasons that inspired me to get into this world is that I wanted to become the mentor and the coach that I wish I would have met, 10 or 15 years ago. And
Right.
so being my own ideal client in a way, really inspires me to do the best work. And I really love what I do.
Right. You sound like you do. You definitely sound authentic, and, your stories are really inspirational. So thank you. Thank you again for sharing. I hope that we can collaborate again soon, because there's so much more, I think, to touch on in this, this journey that we're on, and others. And so I would love to, another opportunity, we can come back and, touch on some other stories that we can share.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, this is just the beginning. And like I said, I just want to thank you again for reaching out and inviting me onto your platform. I really enjoyed it. You have great energy. You're very genuine as well. And let's definitely continue this relationship for sure.
Awesome. Thank you. Cre8tive Craig, please check him out. The information will be down at the link, and we will see you guys soon.